latest in football transactions. You're entering the front office. Now here's your host, Mark Trexler.
Hello and welcome to the front office here on the IT3 show. I'm your host, Mark. Glad to bring you this special episode here for you guys. So the front office is a special segment created by myself where we go and focus on specific news that's happening around the league and where we dive into really in-depth detail about it. Again, this is not in association with Jake and JT and the main IT3 show. This is own independent stuff that I do myself and that I'm diving in and analyzing further for you guys out there as well. So with that said, let's get started for this week's episode here that I have planned for you guys, starting with the playoffs. Now, we did our playoff brackets a couple weeks ago as soon as we found out who was getting in for what division. So obviously the wild card round just finished up. And for the entire wild card, not to toot my own horn, I went 5 for 6. The only game that I messed up on was I had the Colts beating out Buffalo, but that didn't happen. So, with that said, this week's matchup, as you guys just heard on this week's episode, I have the Saints beating out the Bucks, Green Bay Packers beating out the Rams, the Ravens beating out the Bills, and the Browns beating out the Chiefs. Projecting this out even further, Saints moving on next week, going to Green Bay at Lambeau Field. You don't bet against Aaron Rodgers up at Lambeau Field. Yes, this is Drew Brees' last year in the NFL, and it's been marvelous to see what he's done up to this point, and that offense, especially with Kamara running back, is something to be absolutely afraid of. But with that being said as well, Green Bay has worked all season long to get to this point, and after successfully shutting down Derrick Henry when they played the Tennessee Titans. For me, Lambeau Field and Green Bay being at home, the reason why they have this number 1 seed, this is why right here, to get into the Super Bowl. For me, the Green Bay Packers will beat out the Saints to represent the NFC in Super Bowl 55. Moving over to the AFC, I am still convinced that the Browns are going to win, and with that assumption based on, I have the Browns facing the Ravens for the AFC Championship game in this AFC North rivalry matchup. Listen, the Browns should even be here, and you could argue neither should the Ravens. For the Browns showing up and beating the Pittsburgh Steelers, they are coming alive in the playoffs, and I've said time and time again, go ahead and listen to the previous episodes, the Browns are the dark horse, and they're on fire at this playoffs. There is no way you're going to have Lamar Jackson go ahead and beat the Cleveland Browns at this point, especially this late in the playoffs. Your legs can only carry you so much. If you're still relying on him to run around at this point in the playoffs in an AFC Championship game, if he's running around this much now, he is going to be absolutely shot and exhausted if he makes it to the Super Bowl. It is so much easier to shut down a running quarterback, to isolate them in the pocket, because you can keep them in the pocket, and if you can keep them off the game instead of so they can't run around, their offense is basically gone. Cleveland doesn't have to worry about that. They got a dual running back threat between Chubb and Hunt, great wide receivers, a defense that gets the job done when they need to get the job done. For me, the Cleveland Browns will be representing the AFC in Super Bowl 55, which for me is an awesome matchup to see. You have the Green Bay Packers face off against the Cleveland Browns for Super Bowl 55 in Tampa Bay. Listen, Cleveland has made an excellent showing this playoff season, and to get to this point is no less than impressive. However, the Green Bay Packers are a team this year like no other that the Cleveland Browns have faced. The Cleveland Packers are a lot more dangerous than the Kansas City Chiefs and are on an absolute another level. With that being said as well, Aaron Rodgers will be able to execute his play better than Baker Mayfield will be able to. Aaron Rodgers will be able to pick apart the defense and work his plays and do what needs to be done. I'm not saying Baker Mayfield can, I'm not saying Baker Mayfield won't be able to, but I'm saying Aaron Rodgers is more than likely to, and Aaron Rodgers can get the job done. For me, the Super Bowl winner this year is going to be the Green Bay Packers over the Cleveland Browns. But it is not going to be a double-digit victory. is going to be 9 points or below. It's not going to be a double-digit victory for this Super Bowl 55. It's going to be a very interesting game. I don't think it's going to get above in the 30s. I think it's going to stay in the 20s and below. The high 20s and below, excuse me. But it's going to be a very interesting game nonetheless for both teams. Get somewhere in the 20s. It's going to be a great, great game. A must-see game. There's the playoff bracket done. Moving on to our next segment. Obviously, we have your playoff football going on right now, which is absolutely huge. But let's not forget as well, not everyone is in the playoffs. With that being said, the Philadelphia Eagles announced this week on the January 11th, which was Monday, head coach Doug Pederson has been terminated. Doug was there with the Philadelphia Eagles for a total of 5 seasons, had a 42-37-1 record, 3 playoff appearances in 17, 18, and 19, with a 4-2 record in the playoffs, winning the division twice in 17 and 19, and leading to the Philadelphia Eagles to a Super Bowl 52 victory over the New England Patriots. And I'm going to keep going a little bit more in depth before I get more into this. Obviously, you have the owners there of Jeffrey Lurie, and then you have Howie Roseman as the general manager. Once again, you have, in my opinion, you have the Philadelphia Eagles are siding with Carson Wentz. And let me just put this into some perspective for you guys. So originally, if you guys remember, Carson Wentz signed a contract extension with the Philadelphia Eagles back in 2019, which doesn't actually take effect until 2021. But this contract extension, when it takes place in 2021, is for 4 years, $128 million plus dollars, with $70 million plus dollars guaranteed as a signing. If you remember, Carson Wentz was drafted first round, second overall. He is a total quarterback win-loss record of 35-32-1 with a 62.7 completion percentage, 113 touchdowns, 50 interceptions. These are all career stats, mind you. With his best QBR in 2017 at a 78.5. Other than that, the other 4 years for QBR have been 46.7 in 16, 62 in 18, 62.8 in 2019, and 49.7 in 2020. I am at a loss. You have the city of Philadelphia, which is very, very passionate about its sports teams. You can't find another passionate city on this planet about their sports. Philadelphia is diehard sports. Phillies, 76ers, Eagles, Flyers. You name it, they're passionate. The Philadelphia Union soccer team. You have... Let's back this up a little bit. During the Super Bowl run in 2017, Carson Wentz got hurt. Nick Foles had to come in. And Nick Foles goes on and leads the Philadelphia Eagles to the Super Bowl. Carson Wentz, when he got hurt, there were reports going around in the locker room about how he was causing trouble and how he was being a negative in the locker room. And then the following year, in 2018, getting ready to go into the playoffs, the latter part of the regular season, Carson Wentz gets hurt again. And Foles comes in, and the same thing happens again. So it got to the point where the Eagles, due to contracts and everything else, essentially had to choose between Carson Wentz and Nick Foles. And they chose Carson Wentz. This year, you had Carson Wentz once again. Even though he wasn't really hurt. Mind you, he wasn't 100% for majority of this year. But he was dealing with Jalen Hurts in there, vying for playing time on the field as the starting quarterback. And him and Doug Pederson weren't getting along at all. And I think this issue with him getting along with Doug Pederson is a long-standing thing. I don't think it's recent at all. So once again, the Philadelphia Eagles are essentially forced to choose in between Carson Wentz and their head coach Doug Pederson. And once again, they choose Carson Wentz. To have a team that is back, I can understand loyalty and I can understand supporting your players and supporting your quarterbacks and everyone that's been with you. let's put this into perspective, though. Carson Wentz did not win you Super Bowl 52. That was won by Nick Foles, and that was won by Doug Pederson, who both of them were no longer there. Carson Wentz was injured. You have, according to the stats, a quarterback who is clearly average. Once in a while above average, but for the most part average. Heck, Mitchell Trubisky and Jared Goff both look better than Carson Wentz. For how passionate a city and a fan base that Philadelphia has, it's eluding me as to how you can be okay and be, quote unquote, I'll say it, settling with Carson Wentz, who's clearly an average quarterback. You have, within a 5-year time frame, the Eagles go from the top of the world winning the Super Bowl to the last in the division, which was a division they easily could have won this year. This NFC East division was terrible. Each team had a different head coach. Washington signed Juan Rivera. Dallas Cowboys signed Mike McCarthy. New York Giants signed Joe Judge. You had everything returning, and you couldn't come anywhere close to the playoffs. You were the one eliminated, and the other three were still vying for the playoffs. I think there were a combination of factors leading up to Doug Pederson getting fired, which include finishing last in the division, the decision to have a Nate Sudfeld come in and pull Jalen Hurts. Although I don't think that was his decision. I think that was more Jeffrey Lurie's and a Howie's decision to do that and tank that game. And I'm going to say tank that game because that's what it was. The Eagles had a very good chance of winning that game if Hurts was still in there. Hurts was their best chance of winning that game. Not a guarantee win, but their best chance to win that game. With that being said, they realized is they can get a better draft pick by not winning that game. So what do? If you're in that situation? You're going to take out the key components that up your chances to improving yourself to make sure you get that draft pick. So what do? You take out Hurts, and now you up your chances in getting the higher draft pick. What I don't understand is, if that was the Eagles' mindset, why don't the Eagles say, okay, Nate Sudfeld, you're going in at halftime, instead of some random time in the fourth quarter, or saying, okay, Nate Sudfeld, you're starting this game, Jalen Hurts, you're playing backup. It's the way it was done. It was very poor and very haphazard on the part of the Philadelphia Eagles. And once again, the Philadelphia Eagles and Jeffrey Early and Howie Roseman look for a scapegoat. The first one was St. Nick and Nick Foles to protect Carson Wentz. The second one just happened now with Doug Pederson. And by the way, Jim Schwartz is now moving on as well for your defensive coordinator. So the Eagles are really looking in trouble right now. What the Philadelphia Eagles are doing between the owner and the general manager is they are protecting their pick that they spent so much draft capital on and so much money on, and trying to prop him up and make him become this quarterback that they want to envision and see like some of these other teams have. You're trying to see something that doesn't exist. You're not going to see that in Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is not a above average franchise quarterback. That's the bottom line. His stats and his record show that. He's not, he can't be something that he's not. With that said, I need to also make a correction. It was a 2018 Super Bowl win on the 2017 regular season, not a 2017 Super Bowl win. But anyways, getting back to the point, I had a chance this week to talk to two Eagles fans. Shout outs to both AC Sam out there and my friend Shane. Shout out to both you. Both of them are Eagles fans, and I had a chance to ask them some questions. And when I was talking to Sam, she's newer into the NFL and following teams, so she really didn't have too much to offer in terms of the players and the personnel and all that. But I did get to ask her about the fan base and that passionate Philadelphia fan base. And she went on to say the Eagles have always been an underdog with a massive fan base. Players work as hard as they can, but sometimes the other team is just better. In the case of 2018, when they won the Super Bowl, it was fantastic. All the hard work finally paid off, and it showed. But unfortunately, since then, other teams worked just as hard and would beat them once again. The season was upsetting, especially since they are basically one of the worst teams this season. She hopes they use this season as a motivation to work harder for future games so they can become better moving forward. And that's really interesting that she had that perspective, because it was like I was talking about earlier on how you have this Eagles team who is so successful, and then just to see this drop-off, this massive drop-off, is absolutely huge. And that ties into a point that I then asked with Shane, and Shane was on this right as well. Shane had the interesting points of how he thought the Eagles have done terrible for the drafts, and how you have draft picks, on how you draft picks, and they stay for a little bit and then you're moving on. You're not investing time into them to fully develop them. And with that, in the same token, stop hiring old talent that is out of their prime and cannot come in and perform on a regular basis. And that's been obvious as well for this season. If you look at what he said, for me, this was very interesting. He said they don't need to do a complete rebuild, but are close to it due to poor draft picking. I think that in and of itself, along with what Sam said earlier, is very, very interesting and compounding. You have the Eagles, who have a manager and an owner who go and are drafting and aren't building a team out properly to the best of their abilities. I don't know what they're looking at. I don't know who they are using for their scouts and what's going on. But it's clear that they went out, they drafted Carson Wentz, and they thought Carson Wentz is the answer. And you can argue some ways than others, Carson Wentz is or is not the answer. For me, I don't think Carson Wentz is the answer. He's proven to be an average quarterback that is not working in Philadelphia. With that said, if you're not drafting well, you need to be able to supplement your roster with free agency acquisitions. The Philadelphia Eagles are not executing on that front either. They are not bringing in good free agent acquisitions. You're either bringing in free agency acquisitions that are either too high price for what they're actually worth, or you're bringing in players that are past their prime, and other outsiding factors that compounded onto that as well. This is really, really interesting to see this franchise go from a Super Bowl win to literally, after this firing of Doug Pederson, the losing of their defensive coordinator. There was the saying in Philadelphia with Philadelphia 76ers, you got to trust the process when putting a franchise together. I think we've trusted the process long enough on Carson Wentz to have an accurate sample size on Carson Wentz. I do not think he's the answer in Philadelphia. However, the owner and the general manager both disagree with that, and they are continuing to side with Carson Wentz. Whether that's good, whether that's bad, that's time will decide that factor. However, up to this point in time, that is definitely, so far, not the right decision. And until that is changed and something is done about it, this will continue to be a compounding factor year after year, no matter who you have for coaching, no matter who you have as weapons, no matter who you have as your scheme setup and designer, no matter who your coach is. Philadelphia Eagles, you are in the same situation or worse as the Houston Texans are. It's going to be a long road, and essentially you need to buckle down and be ready for it. There is nothing short-term, from what I can see and from what the Philadelphia Eagles are showing to me. There is no short-term answer here. This is going to be a long, painful, and drawn-out process. And I think the Philadelphia Eagles, for the rest of this decade, are going to be a non-factor. I think they'll definitely play spoiler for some other teams, absolutely. But do I see them being a major factor in contending for, say, a Super Bowl or a championship? Maybe a division win here or there, as long as this division stays relatively close, which being the least division, the NFC least. Definitely possible. But I don't see a championship game in the Philadelphia Eagles' future for the rest of this decade, and I certainly don't see a Super Bowl appearance for the Philadelphia Eagles for the rest of this decade. With that said, let's take a look at Doug Pederson here. What is his options moving forward now that he is no longer with the Philadelphia Eagles? Well, rumor has it that he could possibly go over and fill the New York Jets head coaching slot that was vacated there by the firing of Adam Gase, who Adam Gase is now rumored to be going up to New England as the quarterbacks coach up there in New England. Now we know Doug Pederson is a very good friend with the general manager of the New York Jets, which is Joe Douglas. In fact, in Joe Douglas's opening press conference as general manager of the New York Jets, he personally thanked Doug Pederson by name in his press conference. So Doug Pederson could potentially be the next head coach for the New York Jets. With that said as well, I think another interesting fit for Doug Pederson would be the Detroit Lions. But I'm going to get that later on in this episode. Staying with Adam Gase, he finished this year as 2-16, and now he's potentially going to New England as the quarterbacks coach up there. I think it's really interesting in that move how if Adam Gase goes up there as the quarterbacks coach and he stays there as the quarterbacks coach for a couple of years, is it possible Bill Belichick could be retiring within these next few years? How much does he really have left in the tank to coach up there in New England? I mean, yeah, you have old coaches that are still able to do it, like Pete Carroll, for example, Nick Saban, and Belichick is still doing it right now. But it's like, how long is he going to be able to do this? I think it's very interesting that the New England Patriots still have somebody up there in a person like Josh McDaniels. This has been an offensive coordinator who has had multiple job offerings, and he hasn't accepted any of them. Doesn't that seem a little strange? Why would a person keep wanting to hang around in the same position, in the same team, year after year after year? My guess is that Josh McDaniels has been told that he is the one to replace Bill Belichick when Bill Belichick does decide to retire. Wouldn't that be interesting? Josh McDaniels becomes head coach and Adam Gase moves to offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. This could potentially happen within the next 5 years, depending on how long Bill wants to stay as the coach in New England. And I think this season especially was very taxing on him, and it was very tiring as well. I know everyone was shot and tired for COVID-19 and everything that they had to do, and it added a whole nother layer into the routines that all these teams had to go through. But I think you're starting to get to the point where Bill Belichick is getting ready to call it here. With that said, and calling it and all that, you have a former offensive coordinator in Matt Patricia, who was fired after Week 12 from the Detroit Lions, along with the general manager in Bob Quinn. Matt Patricia finished his 2.5 tenure with the Detroit Lions 13-29-1, and all those years he was with them, they were last in the NFC North division. The Detroit Lions, for me, is an interesting franchise in the fact that, yes, it has not won a Super Bowl. And you could argue, well, it is one of the oldest franchises in the NFL. It was formed in 1930, and originally it wasn't even formed originally under the Detroit Tigers. It was formed under the Portsmouth Spartans. Detroit has been in the league for 91 years. They don't have a winning record overall. They have 4 championships, 35, 52, 53, and 57. And they lost the championship in 54. And you have legendary names up there in that franchise. Legendary running backs like Barry Sanders and quarterbacks in Bobby Lane. Both of them respective Hall of Famers for their positions. and you have a future Hall of Famer in wide receiver Calvin Johnson, Megatron. This is a franchise that has had talent and has had tremendous potential, but just can't get it done. If you have the situation with the Detroit Lions, where do you go? Where do you go from here? What is your next step to move forward with this franchise to become relevant and a contender in the NFC North? So right now, what do we know as of right now? The Detroit Lions do not have a head coach, and they do not have a general manager. Rumored to have it, their defensive coordinator is also supposed to be fired, and head coach is still unknown as of right now. Or not head coach, offensive coordinator. Matthew Stafford has been rumored to be on the trading block. I can see that trade happening. With that said as well, if you get rid of Matthew Stafford, you need to replace him. Where did the Detroit Lions go? What is their next step heading into this offseason where they have all these decisions that they need to make? So I decided to take this from the point of, say I was the owner. Say I was in the shoes of Sheila Ford Hamp. If I can talk straight, that would be even better. If I was in her shoes and I was the owner of the Detroit Lions, what would I do this offseason? What are the things that I need to do to make sure I can get this franchise moving forward, moving in the right direction, and on the right path to success? I started to think about head coach, and originally I thought Jim Harbaugh would be a good option here, until Jim Harbaugh re-signed an extension through 2025 with Michigan, making him no longer eligible for this position. But I thought if you're bringing a new quarterback, or if you're going to draft a new quarterback in the draft, like say a Trey Lance or a Mac Jones, having Jim Harbaugh there would be perfect to have a new quarterback come in and having him there. But that's not going to happen, obviously. So with Jim Harbaugh out of the question, who would I hire for head coach for the Detroit Lions? And for me, I will look at Doug Pederson. You're looking at a head coach who has learned under Andy Reid, who has proven he can lead a team like the Philadelphia Eagles to a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl. He can get the job done, and that's been proven. For me, my hire for head coach would be Doug Pederson. He would be the fit that I'm looking for. He has winning potential, he has a winning pedigree, and he knows how to handle a football team and get the job done. That's what I'm looking for the Detroit Lions. I'm looking to bring in a winning culture. I'm looking at bringing in a head coach who is passionate, who cares about his players and about the game and can get the job done. For me, Doug Pederson fits the bill in Detroit. With that said, obviously the head coach can't do it all, so I need to find a general manager, I need to find a defensive coordinator, and I need to find an offensive coordinator to pair with him. I started looking around the leagues for possible offensive coordinators, and I really thought a good fit and an interesting fit here would be Brian Leftwich, the Tampa Bay Bucks offensive coordinator, to see what he's doing down there with Bruce Arians, Tom Brady, and all that, and how that offense is running. Wouldn't that be interesting to see in Detroit, especially if you're bringing in a newer, younger quarterback? Leftwich, in my opinion, is definitely a rising talent in this league and a rising coach. So to see him either come up and either be a head coach in the future or stay as a coordinator for a little while longer, I really think it's only going to be a matter of time before he gets his chance. And I really think if he was getting the situation in Detroit, getting in a younger quarterback and getting a team where you can actually build around and fully work on everything like you're supposed to, and not just trying to throw pieces together, you can actually potentially build around here now. If you're sending out Matthew Stafford, you're going to be getting return in for that, whether that's players, whether that's draft picks, combination thereof, etc. You can turn that around and turn that into assets that you can use to help build right now or into the future, depending on what you want to do. I really think Leftwich would be a good fit there for the offensive coordinator position. With that said as well, I would like to see Leslie Frazier as the defensive coordinator for these Detroit Lions. Obviously, right now he's the defensive coordinator and the assistant head coach for Buffalo. But don't forget, Leslie Frazier also used to coach the Minnesota Vikings. being a person who has coached in this division before and knows what it takes to win this division and what it takes to beat the Green Bay Packers and beat the Chicago Bears and what your own team's strengths and weaknesses are. Leslie Frazier is a very likable person, just like Byron Leftwich, excuse me. They're both likable people, and they both can build their positions out to where they need to be. Both of them would be great fits for both offensive and defensive coordinators. Then you go to your general manager. Two people that I thought, and everyone always thinks of TV hosts, so you could argue Louis Riddick would possibly be a fit here for general manager. And then I started thinking, okay, well, besides TV hosts, who else could you actually plug in here that would be a reasonable fit? And I actually came with the name of Brad Holmes, and I think Brad Holmes is a very interesting pick because he right now is the director of college scouting for the Rams. He's been with the Rams PR department, and he's been with the Rams scouting department as well. All this over a span of 18 plus years. To have a person like this come in and be your GM of your franchise who knows what it takes to do a good job on scouting. Look at the Rams right now. Appeared in a Super Bowl, losing in a Super Bowl though to Tom Brady. Constantly in the playoffs, having Sean McVay there, being able to get Sean McVay talent that he can constantly build around. It's very impressive, and it takes a person very skilled and very specialized in what they do to be able to get good quality draft picks and draft the right person at the right time. Brad Holmes has proven he can do that. For me, he would be the answer here for the general manager position if I were to hire him for this position with Detroit. So now this leaves the question at quarterback. Obviously, I said before, Matthew Stafford is on the trading block. Would I go through and I trade him? Yes, I would. I think there's a couple things that you solve by doing that. First of all, you move on from Matthew Stafford. You send him to a team where he can become a contender for playoffs and a potential Super Bowl, just like Phillip Rivers was moved on from San Diego. And I know Stafford has meant a lot to the Detroit Lions, but it's to the point now where he's later in his career and he definitely wants to have something to show for it. And I don't think he's going to be able to get that with Detroit. So you move on from Matthew Stafford. You bring back in whatever you can, players, draft capital, etc. So now you go and you take that, and what do? Oh, not to mention, you're also going to save money with the salary cap as well. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to look at the draft board, and if he's available, I'm going to be taking Mac Jones as quarterback. Mac Jones, yes, is a redshirt junior this year for Alabama, but he just had an awesome season this year with Alabama and winning the championship. This was an impressive kid down there in the SEC conference, lighting up on the field. This is going to be a good quality quarterback to build a team around in the future. And I say in the future. So what do you do in the meantime? Because you can't just draft Mac Jones and throw him in there right now. I mean, yeah, you could, but it's not good for long term. You may be able to win some games here and there in the short term, but long term, future out, you want to make sure you develop and progress a quarterback properly. Throwing him in there right now is not going to get that done. So where's the answer for the short term to mid term range for the Chicago Bears? And actually, the answer is within your own division, believe it or not, even though he's going to be a free agent. Your answer is Mitchell Trubisky. Now, I know I'm going to catch a lot of flack for that, but I am telling you, the reason why Mitchell Trubisky is so terrible in his stats with Chicago is because of Matt Nagy. Matt Nagy is supposed to be a head coach that specializes in quarterback talent. That's why he was brought into Chicago in the first place, was to make sure to grow, develop, and groom Mitchell Trubisky, who the Bears went up to the second overall pick in the first round to get Mitchell Trubisky. And Matt Nagy absolutely destroyed him. With that said, Mitchell actually has had a pretty good year this year. He's had 9 games where he's gone 6-3 with a 67% completion, 16 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, a 61.8 QBR, And this isn't a terrible designed Chicago Bears offense being helmed by a head coach who's supposed to be a specialist, and he's clearly not a specialist with quarterbacks. In a offense run by a Byron Leftwich. Mind you, Byron Leftwich is a former quarterback in the NFL. This would make a boatload of sense to bring in head coach Byron Leftwich to teach not only Mac Jones, an up-and-coming quarterback, but a current quarterback that you can use now, Mitchell Trubisky, and to compete in this division against a Bears team, against a Minnesota team, against a Packers team. Maybe not immediately, but definitely within the next 2 to 3 years, because you have to build around. You can't just form a team overnight. Everyone would like to think that, but you can't just form a team in one season. You can make serious progress in one season, but you can't form a team in one season. This would be a great building potential to set in the foundation with the right pieces and build properly and create teams that are around for dynasties, like some of these Pittsburgh teams, some of these Dallas Cowboys teams, some of these 49er teams. You can go on and on with variations of others. So just to summarize all of that again, if I was in the ownership position of the Detroit Lions, I would go ahead, I would hire Doug Pederson as my head coach, bring in Byron Leftwich as my offensive coordinator, bring in Leslie Frazier as my defensive coordinator. I'm going to be trading Matthew Stafford out. I'm going to be taking his assets and all that I get back from him, turning that around into a quarterback in the draft, preferably Mac Jones. If Mac Jones isn't available, I'm either going to invest that in offensive linemen or defensive linemen. And then I'm going to go out on the free agency market and I'm going to acquire Mitchell Trubisky. All these for me with the addition of the general manager of Brad Holmes, who is an expert at drafting, and he's proven that with the Rams. All of these pieces here now coming into Detroit, for me, show and can advance and improve this franchise that still has some considerable talent on it, that does have a significant amount of potential. With that said, guys and gals, I thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Front Office here on the IT3 Show, hosted by yours truly. I'm looking forward to doing about 1 or 2 of these a month, give or take, depending on what news and interesting things that I see fit that really needs to have a good diving into and that is available. And really, really interesting. I try to pull sources from whether it's online, TV shows, newscasters, sportscasters, even local fans and people that I know, just to try to get everybody's opinion and try to get a best overall view of the situation and try to possibly build a direction forward. So I hope you guys enjoy this edition of the Front Office. I will see you all. Don't forget to check out our other IT3 Show episodes. Check us out on social media. Send us an email. Check us out on our website for written information and articles that are done there as well. Signing out.